Hello everybody, and thank you so much for watching this explainer video of the Academy of Management Perspectives. My name is Gideon Markman and I'm from Colorado State University and Ghent University, and the job of this explainer video is to bring clarity about the type of submissions that AMP is seeking. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mission of AMP, the two types of submissions that we have, describe the differences between hypotheses, theories, laws, and perspectives, and of course talk about AMP in the context of other strong journals within the Academy of Management. And finally, I will conclude with very concrete examples of current articles with AMP. The mission of the Academy of Management Perspectives is public policy, blah, 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 management theory, public policy, and management theory. I think you get the picture. The mission of AMP is to advance theory and public policy. Let's look at the performance of AMP. Two of the most important numbers to you and to us is, first of all, the impact factor. So you can see AMP is a very high impact factor. And of course, acceptance rate. Given that acceptance rate in most journals is below 10%, AMP has a very high acceptance rate. Why is that? Is it because AMP is not rigorous? No. It's simply because we follow a very different format. At AMP, you first submit a proposal, it is evaluated and reviewed, and only once you get the green light, you will proceed with your project and submit a full paper. So it is a way to de-risk some of the submissions. The submission process. Here I want to give a big shout out to our journal editor, Phil Fan, because you can see that once you submit your proposal, within 3 days, you get a response whether your proposal can move to the next step. Once your proposal is accepted, it goes through a double-blind review process. Let's talk about the two types of submissions that we have at AMP. The first one is a paper proposal. That's a traditional submission. And of course, what we're looking for are powerful ideas, important research questions. Your submission should have a clear motivation, unimpeachable contribution to theory and public policy. In your submission, you want to be able to explain why your research question is important, why the perspective is innovative and non-obvious. We do publish papers with data, but data is never the core of what we do. It's never the main course. Symposium proposal, which is a second type of submission that we have, is really a curated special issue. You get a commitment from 6 to maybe 10 scholars to submit a full paper. And in your submission of the proposal, you will identify the importance of the research question, why it is interesting and important. You will give a brief overview of the history of the literature. You will clarify your value proposition. Of course, you will also need to get a written commitment from everyone on your team, all the other 6 to 10 authors. And of course, at the end, if you want, you can provide an introduction to your symposium. At AMP, we do not believe that rigorous articles should be difficult to read. We don't think that the writing style should be a turnoff. On the contrary, we think that the writing style should be enticing. We want AMP to be a page turner. If you submit your article to a readability test, we're looking for articles that are roughly at the level of 8, 9, all the way to 10th grade. Let me give you an example. Nobel laureate Richard Feynman's lecture on the Heisenberg uncertainty principle had a readability level of 8th grade. Now you tell me, if he can bring clarity to the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, what is our excuse? AMP is a pragmatic journal. We look for writing style that's cogent, coherent, logical. We want articles that are internally consistent and externally impactful, evidence-based arguments. So what is AMP? Well, the articles are highly tractable, useful, interesting, non-trivial, and they provide useful perspective. We target academic readers. We do not write HBR articles. We focus on evidence rather than esoteric topics, and we look for a writing style that is informative, interesting, and engaging. We look for articles that synthesize and translate theoretical, empirical research. What AMP is not, well, we do not publish review articles. For that, we have excellent other journals out there. We do not publish empirical hypothesis testing articles either. For that you have AMJ, for example. We do not publish armchair theorizing on diaries or practitioner-oriented articles. Now that we understand what AMP is and what it is not, let's try to get a little bit deeper into some of the moving parts that you see. True or false? A supported hypothesis will be elevated to a theory, and a theory will eventually be upgraded into a physical law. True or false? Well, we know very well that hypotheses, theories, and laws are like apples, oranges, and bananas. It doesn't matter how much water and fertilizer you're going to give them. They will never turn into each other. Meaning, it's not that one is more powerful, more important than another. It is about the fact that each one of them is fulfilling a very different and yet very critical role. So, hypothesis is simply a limited prediction of a phenomenon. A theory is a causal statement of what causes what, when, where, and why. Einstein's theory of relativity explains what gravity is and how it works. The theory of evolution, to many of you out there, is still only a theory. So what is a law? A law is a descriptive statement of a phenomenon, usually in mathematical equation. Newton's law of gravity or Mendel's law of independent assortment are examples of a physical law. Laws describe an observation. They do not provide the how or why gravity works. That's not their job. To be more specific, astrophysics used Newton's law of gravity to land robot on Mars, but not to explain gravity per se. Einstein's theory of relativity does that. Biologists use Mendel's law of independent assortment to predict which traits pass from parents to offsprings, not why that passage actually occurs. After we discovered DNA and chromosomes, T.H. Morgan developed the theory of chromosomal inheritance to explain that passage. Theories and even scientific laws are quite flexible. They have exceptions. They can be proven wrong and they can change over time. So here is the part that is most difficult for many of us. Our job is really to ask, how can I show myself wrong? Or under what condition will my theory not hold? Ongoing testing and observation tweak the law of gravity and the law of independent assortment. Newton's law of gravity breaks down when looking at the quantum level or the subatomic level, and Mendel's law of independent assortment breaks down when traits are linked on the same chromosome. Let's talk about perspectives. The Latin root or perspective is to look through. A perspective is an abstracted point of view. For example, teachers may have the perspective that students want to learn because they recognize the correlation between education and success in life. Or maybe parents develop the perspective that kids are pushing the boundaries because they are rebellious. At AMP, we want your point of view. We want your perspective on a management or public policy phenomenon. So now that we understand hypotheses, we understand theories, we understand laws, we understand perspectives, and we understand AMP, we know what it is, we know what it is not. Let's position it in the wider context of AMR, AMJ, and AMD. So AMR is, of course, a highly theoretical journal. It features breakthrough theories. AMJ is highly empirical. It is still focusing quite heavily on theory. That's why it doesn't go all the way to the left. AMD is highly empirical, but not too theoretical. AMP captures the sweet spot between AMJ and AMR. It has a high focus on theory, but it is not quite AMR. It does pay attention to data, but it is not AMJ. Let's assume that you offer an authoritative perspective on a scholarly issue, and you're doing a great job. You're very clear, but are you making a contribution? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to ask other questions. Do you have a compelling, big question? Are you addressing an important, big gap? And when I say big, I mean not only big to you, but anyone you ask. Most people will say, yes, this is important. Maybe the gap that you're trying to address is a gap between theory and practice, or maybe it is between theory and theory, or maybe it's a gap between data and theory. And can you tell why this is important? What will we miss if we didn't read your article? To clarify this even more, let me segue into what I call timeless truth versus temporary truth. Over 150 years ago, we have accumulated decades and decades of data about the fact that we could not fly. It doesn't matter what type of feather wings we strap to ourselves. It didn't matter what type of cliffs we used to jump from and flap our wings as hard as we could. We always crashed. And over time, after doing it for hundreds of years, we developed the certitude that this was a timeless truth. We could not fly. Until in 1903, the Wright brothers proved that we were wrong. It was actually a temporary truth. It was not a timeless truth. We could fly. I'm sharing these extreme examples, if you will, and there are many more, simply to make the point. We want perspectives that challenge the truth. Can you do that? Will your new truth change how we theorize? Will your new truth help us conduct research? Or will your new truth lead to the discovery of new questions? Will it open up new domains? Will it close debates that have been chronic because they went on and on and on with no resolution? Or maybe you will bring awareness and clarity to a wider issue that we overlooked for way too long. So now that we understand all of this, let me share a few examples of recent AMP articles. I will talk about the dogmas that they are challenging and how they bring a new truth, if you will. My dear colleagues, Yolanda Saracen and Tom Dean from Colorado State University challenge the dogmas that when entrepreneurial firms that are environmentally focused or maybe socially focused are acquired by large corporations, they are selling out. And actually they brought a perspective on how smaller firms can transmit and propagate their missions and their values into larger organizations. Saraswati and Ramesh challenge the dogma that only governments can tackle big market failures such as environmental degradation and that single individuals could not do that. They use effectuation theory to develop a self-selection, collective action perspective to explain and predict how even private individuals can tackle such formidable problems. And Lumpkin and Back challenge the dogma that wealth creation is only about making money. They provide a civic wealth creation perspective in which wealth is not only money and finance, but actually also health, happiness, justice, well-being, dignity, and so on. And finally, I thought I would use this opportunity to put a plug for my own research that challenges the dogma that companies only compete with other companies and introduce a perspective according to which competitive dynamic research is actually overlooking an entire class of attackers we call non-market players. The perspective that we brought is what we call non-market hostility. This is a perspective that explains why, how, and when non-market players attack companies and bring them to their knees. And finally, my work with Ted Waldron again challenged the dogma that market entry is always adversarial. We presented a micro-entry perspective where startups sometimes penetrate markets that are well barricaded by very strong incumbents without intensifying hostility. You can call it assisted entry, and it occurs when entrants either solidify incumbents' position or they target the niches that incumbents simply do not want or cannot capture. So now I have to conclude by saying, look, not every award-winning paper will have all of those elements, but I think you can see that AMP articles are highly focused, they are relevant, they are problem-driven, they bring deep understanding about the strengths and weaknesses of any particular phenomenon, they are forward-looking, they are edgy, they are relevant to theory and to public policy, and they are very well written. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Don't hesitate to reach out to me with questions and comments. Goodbye.